This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. The series where I rank cards based on their historical performances at Magic's highest level of competition. This time around, I'm looking at red 1-drops. Before I go any further, I want to make it clear what I mean by 1-drop. I know people use it pretty broadly to refer to anything that costs a single mana, but for me, and the multiple MTG wikis and other sources I checked, it only refers to permanents. That's because you drop them on the battlefield and they stay there. This means that Lightning Bolt and other instants and sorceries that are burn spells are not 1-drops, according to my definition. I have a whole top 10 on burn spells, though, if that's what you want. Anyway, Red Deck Wins is one of the game's oldest archetypes, and it shows up just about every standard format at some point. These are fast decks loaded up with cheap, efficient red creatures, like the powerful 1-drops on this list. They also tend to run some burn spells to burn blockers out of the way and close out the game late. The current success of Red Deck Wins variants in both Pioneer and Standard had me wondering how old red 1-drops stack up to the ones we have today, and that's how I ended up doing this list. In all, there were 196 cards eligible for this list, and in this video, we'll count down the 10 that have made the biggest impact at Magic's highest competitive level. Before we get to the list, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour, Players Tour, and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Alright, let's get to the list. At number 10, it is Zurgo Bellstriker. Red decks have always loved 1-mana creatures with 2 power. It's something we will see several more times on this list, so Zurgo Bellstriker is pretty great, since you get a straight up 2/2 for only a single red mana, a pretty amazing deal. He also has the dash mechanic, which makes you pay more for him and he returns to your hand at the end of your turn, but it gives him the added upside of having haste when you really need him to. Zurgo does have a couple of downsides though. For one thing, he can't block big creatures, but if you're playing red aggro, you probably won't be blocking much anyway. The other downside Zurgo comes with is that he's legendary. This means that if you ever have 2 of him, the other one is just going to be a dead card. On the bright side, he represents a fast enough clock for red decks that he will often die to early removal spells or get blocked. Generally, Zurgo isn't the legendary creature that will be around forever, so if you have more, you will usually be able to play it later on in the game. Still, probably not the best plan to run 4 of these. In Standard, Zurgo was played in the 2014 to 2016 version of Red Deck Wins, as well as in Atarka Red, a mostly mono-red aggro deck that splashed green for Atarka's command. Recently, Zurgo has also put up some points in Pioneer's version of Red Deck Wins, and that deck is pretty well positioned in the format right now, so Zurgo may gain some more points in the future. At number 9, it's SKIRK Prospector, the first of 4 goblins to make this list, which shouldn't come as a huge surprise given that goblins are red's representative race and often appear at low mana costs. The Prospector may not hit as hard as some of the other 1-drops on this list, but he comes with the ability to help you ramp mana by sacrificing goblins, including himself. You might be familiar with the more recent printing of the Prospect from Dominaria, but he gained all of his points from his first printing in Onslaught. That block was all about tribal decks, and the red tribe was goblins, and they were super pushed, becoming a dominant deck in block standard and extended as a result, and the Prospector could assist you in having really stupid starts thanks to the mana it could produce. He is legal in Pioneer thanks to his reprint, and with a few more goblins in Standard, he might have a shot at putting up some points for the first time since 2005. At number 8, it is Goblin Welder. It's actually tied with SKIRK Prospector, but I gave it the edge because it has more Pro Tour top 8s. Most of the creatures on this list are aggressive and were part of some red-based aggro deck at some point, but not Goblin Welder. The Welder is more complicated than your average goblin, and instead of just turning sideways to do damage, the Welder can help you cheat super powerful artifacts into play from your graveyard, and that is precisely what he's done over the years in Extended, Legacy, and Vintage. In the extended days, he would often cheat something like Platinum Angel into play as early as turn 2. In Legacy, he has more frequently been used to help decks assemble the Painter's Servant combo, even if one of the combo pieces gets blown up. And in Vintage, he has been used to cheat Sundering Titan into play super early, which is usually enough to not only have a huge creature, but to blow up all of your opponent's lands. Goblin Welder has points as recently as 2019 and is likely to continue to put up points, albeit at a slow pace. At number 7, it is JACKAL, an iconic card for red deck wins. The earliest red deck wins decks were usually called Sly, and they showed up in Standard in 1998, with JACKAL as the deck's best one-drop. By the time of Tempest Block season later that year, the deck started to be called Red Deck Wins. JACKAL gives you a highly efficient creature as a 1-mana 2/1, but with a significant drawback that makes you take the same damage the pup takes. That might sound significant, but if a red deck is doing what it's supposed to do, they don't need to worry about their own life total because the opponent will be dead before it matters. The pup also saw play in extended Sly and red deck win decks between 1998 and 2004. At number 6, it's KIRD, another powerful red 1-drop from the game's early days. KIRD wasn't played in mono red decks at all, because if you ran forests, you got to have a 1-mana 2/3, which is an amazing deal. KIRD has points from Magic's very first Worlds, which came in 1994, where it was featured in zoo decks, so called because the deck ran several creatures, in addition to the ape, that you might find in your local zoo. KIRD received a reprint in 2006 and enjoyed some more success in Standard as a result, showing up in a new era of zoo decks. KIRD has seen play in other formats too, especially Extended, where it actually got banned in 1997 because it was considered too good. By the time it was reprinted, it got another run through Extended, this time without being banned, and made the most of it, continuing to show up in zoo aggro decks. It has also found a bit of success in Modern, where it has been played in, you guessed it, zoo decks. These days, though, KIRD has been outclassed by other 1-drops that don't demand a forest to be super efficient, some of which are above him on this list. At number 5, it is MOGG FANATIC, a 1-drop who is strictly worse these days as the result of a rules change. The FANATIC was great in the old days because damage used to use the stack. This meant that you could block something with the FANATIC, put the 1 damage from the FANATIC's power on the creature it is blocking, and then sacrifice it to do the additional 1 damage. This meant that FANATIC could easily take down X2s, but eventually the rules changed so that damage didn't use the stack, and if you sacrificed MOGG FANATIC before it went to the damage phase, you didn't get to do the damage because MOGG FANATIC is no longer in play, and that made MOGG FANATIC a much less powerful card. So, keep in mind as I talk about this card, it has all these points from the days gone by where damage used the stack. In those days, he was one of the best 1-drops around, not just in red, but in any color. In block and Standard, he was played in decks like Sly and Red Deck Wins, and he was played in similar decks in Extended too. In addition to your usual red aggro decks, burn decks, and zoo decks, the FANATIC was also played in Goblin tribal decks, alongside SKIRK PROSPECTOR. All of this allowed him to amass a ton of points in the format. He was even good enough for Legacy Goblins, putting up a few points there. It really is sad that the guy became so much worse when the rules changed, but at least he'll always have those memories. At number 4, it is Goblin Guide. A 1-mana 2/2 with haste is some serious business. Serious enough that it comes with a downside. When it attacks, your opponent gets to draw the top card of their library if it's a land. That's a real downside, make no mistake, but like its progenitor JACKAL, Goblin Guide tends to help make opponents dead quickly enough that giving them extra cards doesn't really matter. In Standard, the guide was played in a variety of aggro decks, like Landfall, Naya, and Boros, but it was also played in a more typical red deck wins deck. The guide, being printed in 2009, was also around for the waning years of Extended, where it managed a few points. Modern has been where he has really thrived, though, being one of the best turn 1 plays for decks like Burn, Death Shadow Zoo, and, of course, Red Deck Wins. The guide doesn't have any points in 2020 just yet, but it seems pretty unlikely it's going to go the whole year without adding to its score. At number 3, it is Soulscar Mage. This is one that surprised me a little. I knew it was seeing play and would make the list, but I thought it would be somewhere in the middle, not at number 3 with 80 points. Soulscar Mage comes with the prowess mechanic, something that pairs incredibly well with red aggro decks that like to run burn spells you can play at instant speed. This makes the mage hit harder and also makes it more challenging to block. On top of that, it upgrades your burn spells that hit your opponent's creatures, since even if you can't kill them with them, the creature gets shrunk, which is usually enough to make the Soulscar Mage win in combat, especially with the addition of prowess. The mage was heavily played in Standard its entire time there, to the point that it has a whopping 70 points in that format. It was played in Ramunap Red, a variant of Red Deck Wins that was so good, some of the cards in it had to get banned. The mage kept seeing play, though, in a deck that, without Ramunap, went back to just being called Red Deck Wins. Near the end of its time in Standard, it also transitioned into Rakdos aggro decks. It also sees play in Modern, where it has been featured in both Phoenix Deck Wins and Prowess Deck Wins. Soulscar Mage is also off to a pretty hot start in Pioneer, already having 4 points in the new format. At number 2, it's Monastery SWIFTSPEAR, another 1-mana 1/2 with prowess. The SWIFTSPEAR trades in the -1/-1 counter ability of Soulscar Mage for haste. The SWIFTSPEAR is great in red aggro and burn decks for the same reason Soulscar Mage is, and it presents an even faster clock thanks to haste. Like Soulscar Mage, Monastery SWIFTSPEAR already has 4 points in Pioneer. It has also been played in modern decks, including Red Deck Wins, as well as Death's Shadow Zoo, Blue-Red Aggro, and Naya Burn. Unlike Soulscar Mage, Monastery SWIFTSPEAR also has some points from Legacy Delver decks. It will be interesting to see whether Soulscar Mage or Monastery SWIFTSPEAR ends up being higher on this list in the long run. And at number 1, it's Grim LAVAMANCER. Like Goblin Welder, the LAVAMANCER is not the most aggressive 1-drop, since it's only a 1/1. However, unlike the Welder, it does come with an ability that fits really well into red aggro and burn decks, since you can turn all of your fallen creatures and expended burn spells into 2 damage to any creature or player for only 1 red mana, a pretty great rate on a repeatable effect. It gets even better with fetch lands. It can represent just as much damage as other red 1-drops on this list, even if he's slower about it and doesn't attack that much. The LAVAMANCER has received 2 printings, something that has contributed to its high score. While it didn't see much play in Standard the first time around, only mustering 2 points, and it really wasn't heavily played the second time around either, with only 6 points coming from Red Deck Wins decks, the second printing did give him legality in Modern, which is where he has gone on to considerable success, especially in Jund, Burn, and Zoo decks. It also has points from extended Red Deck Wins and Burn decks, Legacy Delver, and Vintage Canadian Threshold decks. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you need to catch up on the over 250 other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now.